So here's my story. I grew up in the South Bronx, not the best area, so obviously I had a few moments growing up that were really not good. But the tales of risky encounters with junkies and creeps are for another day. I'm street smart now. But back then, not so much. So, this particular story strangely begins in 5th grade, although the scary part doesn't come in until literally years later. I was 10, pudgy, dorky and painfully shy. Understandably so. I had just been transferred into regular classes, as I had spent my previous years in bilingual education. When you spend most of your time speaking in Spanish and having only Hispanic friends, it's jarring to suddenly be placed out of your comfort zone. All of my old friends were still together and suddenly I couldn't hang out with them as my lunch table, room number, and assigned area for recess were completely different. I was alone. Completely and utterly friendless. Until, two girls from my new class suddenly befriended me and took me under their wings. Olive was nice, super nice. I regret not keeping in touch with her once I went on to middle school. She came from a really bad background, but then again most of us did too, but she was always smiling and willing to explain things I didn't understand. Grace was nice but really snarky at times, even to Olive, who was her best friend forever. She would call both Olive and I poor for not having a cell phone, although hello, this was the early 2000s, cell phones still weren't that common with the youngins, or ugly as a weird endearment. She would let loose a maniacal laughter when she thought something was funny, grasping her purple glasses to her face and do a full body wiggle. These would often make me and Olive giggle because it seemed so fake, like a show she did to make us laugh. Looking back on it now, it should have been a sign she wasn't a really sane person. But, the friendship persisted. This all came to a weird impasse when one day Olive stopped showing up to school. Grace and her were in an off/on stage, where one day they were best friends, the other times couldn't be in the same room and hated each other. I was always in the middle of these fights and was often told to pick a side. In this week of no Olive, Grace and I were playing tag outside during recess. Grace was chasing me, and I was momentarily distracted because I finally saw my group of old friends from my previous years. I yelled a quick timeout, and looking at it now I feel like she should have heard me, but she continued running straight at me. Suddenly she tackled me to the floor, and this is where my memory gets a bit foggy because a floor made out of pure concrete and gravel plus no time to brace myself equals bad stuff. I remember not moving for a while, and a school aide pushing Grace out of the way to lift me up as I started to sob and babble in Spanish wanting my mom. The next thing I know, my grandmother, who barely speaks a lick of English, was rushing into the nurse's room yelling that one should never put a packet of ice on a head would, what the nurse did to stop the blood, and crying because the back of my shirt was streaked with said blood. It apparently looked a lot worse than it was, but at the time this was some serious shit, so I was sent on my way with my grandmother to the emergency room. Questions were thrown at me by my frantic parents when they were told by my grandmother where I was. Who did this to you? Are you being bullied? Don't be scared, no one will be mad. Tell us who it was, they'll get expelled. But in my tiny child brain, Grace was my friend. She didn't mean anything. It was an accident. And so nothing was done. I went back to school. Grace said sorry and warned me to pay more attention next time we were playing together. Olive eventually came back. She now lived with her grandmother as her parents were unfit to take care of her, and 5th grade eventually came to a close. We graduated. Went to the same middle school, but I was again separated as I was placed into gifted and talented rather than general ed. I thought myself a little genius, but I really just had a weird form of a tiger dad I was scared of displeasing. Middle school was a rough time for me. I was an emo kid. I was basically at the end of the nerdy totem pole. I was weird. But, I made good friends, many who again I lost when I decided I wanted out of the Bronx for high school. One girl in particular named Michelle was such a cool girl but also really messed up. She would come in with cut marks on her wrists, not show up at school for weeks at a time, ran away once and was sent to a mental institution for attempted suicide. But, she was what I considered my best friend during my 3 awkward years. And so when I went to high school, separated from my tight-knit group, I maintained in contact with her the most. Sporadically, but still a lot more than the rest of my friends. Why is she mentioned in this story? Is Merpatico just writing a long memoir of her life? No, dear reader, it all comes together soon. In one of my first days of high school, I was still learning how to take the train by myself, so was always really concentrated on where I was going instead of my surroundings. When I was waiting to get off the train, I suddenly felt a tug on my arm, and turned around to see the dimply face of Grace and bright pink glasses. I was surprised, and must have looked shocked because her first words were, "Don't you remember me? Or can't you talk?" She laughed, and I laughed alongside her too, not really knowing what to say. It was weird. I hadn't seen her in 4 years, but I was her friend at one point, so I wanted to be nice. She walked with me all the way in front of my apartment building, updating me on how she didn't talk to that stupid BTCH Olive anymore because she didn't like her style, bragged about her hot older boyfriend who was in a gang, and I generally thought she was joking or at least just hyping herself up. I walked with my brand new cell phone in my hand, a blue Sidekick ID with a flip keyboard that was all the rage, and she immediately honed in on my hand as we got to the front of my building. "Oh, you got a cell now, ugly." I was into sarcasm. I was a crappy teenager, okay. So I didn't react to her taunt and just said, "Yeah, you jealous," and laughed it off. She asked for my number, to keep in touch, but didn't give me her number in return, just said she would text me to catch up and hang out. Fine, cool, whatever, I didn't think much of it. That very day I was doing some homework on my bed, my older sister hogging the computer with headphones in and ignoring my chatter, when my phone started to ring. I saw the jumble of numbers, and although I know it's unknown, still picked up the phone with the questioning hello. What I was met with was the worst toe-curling scream in my life that nearly blew out my ear. It was horrible. It sounded like the devil himself was torturing a woman and she was screaming murder. It was so loud that even my sister with headphones on jumped up in the air and turned around to see me disconnect the call. We were both shaken, but she didn't have time to ask me if I was okay because the cell phone started to ring again. I saw the same number and stupidly picked up the phone again, my sister calling my mother over to say we might be overhearing some murder or something. We watched a lot of CSI, okay. The call connected and I put on my bravest voice, "Who is this?" The voice on the other end sounded super high-pitched and just giggled for a while, like I was making the funniest joke. "Merpatico. It's you, right?" the voice said. "Yeah. Why are you calling me?" I responded. "I know where you live," it sing-songed at me so. I was filled with false bravado. "Who are you? You go to this school and take this train at this stop." It just continued to sound really high-pitched, almost screechy, and what is the point? I was so sarcastic everyone in my family was in the room at this point. Tomorrow morning, the voice suddenly went from really high-pitched and giggly sing-song to the raw throat scream I heard in the first call, "I'm going to fucking push you into the train tracks and kill you. If you don't die, he'll find you until you die. Die, die you stupid bitch. Why don't you die?" My father grabbed the phone from my hand. "Who the fuck are you? I'm calling the police. If you touch my daughter, I'm going to..." He didn't get to finish because the call suddenly disconnected. He took my phone and immediately took it to the precinct we lived nearby. Nothing could be done. I didn't know who called me, and my life wasn't in real danger, so what could be done? A police officer was already stationed to patrol that train station anyway. My father was assured I would be fine. And I was really, but I lived in a constant state of fear in the early mornings when I would wake up to go to school. My parents actually started walking me to the train and picking me up as if I was a child who needed their hand held. But I appreciated it nonetheless. There's only a few things New Yorkers are afraid of, and falling into the train tracks to a horrible death is one of them, and a bedbug or rat infestation is a close second. A few months later I got a text from my good old buddy Michelle saying, "Hey, do you know a girl named Grace?" I typed out an affirmative and asked how she knew her. What a weird coincidence, I thought. She's fucking crazy. My friend texted back, "I'm transferring school after this year, and I hope I never see her." I was honestly so confused. What did Michelle mean? She got into a fight a couple of days ago and literally tore this girl's ears off. The texts came in. She said you were mean to her in elementary school. But that's shit. You're not a mean person. Said I didn't believe her. She said I better because I would regret it. It suddenly all clicked. The voice in the phone call, it definitely sounded like Grace's voice if a demon had possessed her, or she had just modified her voice. But why would she do that? I warned Michelle about what I thought she did to me and she agreed it was probably her. But to this day I can't possibly imagine what I must have done to her to do that. The police had written it off as a bad prank, but how did she even know Michelle was my friend to start to talk to her about how she knew me? It still boggles my mind, and I still refuse to stand near the edge of the platform to take the train because of that one phone call. So, to end this incredibly long post. Grace, let's not ever meet again, you scare the hell out of me. This happened 2 nights ago when me and my partner were leaving the cinema after watching a film that ended at around 11 p.m. We grabbed a Costa and headed out to the car park at around 11:20 p.m. It was dark and quiet seeing as we'd been to watch a film that had already been released a while, so the time we came out was quiet and there weren't many people. We had parked the far end of the car park as we'd popped across the road to get snacks before the film. There was just us on that side of the car park and a few other people paying for their tickets at the front near the entrance of the cinema. There are tall bushes surrounding the car park which have a road on the other side which was also relatively quiet at the time. My partner and I are chatting away when we both hear this odd noise. It sounded like when 2 cats are fighting or preparing to fight, and sometimes can sound like a baby crying. It's a noise that often makes me apprehend immediate danger for some reason. It's almost piercing. Both my partner and I looked at each other, made note of it and expressed our mutual creeped out feeling and quickly headed to the car without seeing or hearing anything else. We pulled up to the barrier, inserted our ticket and drove out. There is a short bend round to your left and you come up to the junction of the, currently, quiet road. Left is back past the car park and right takes you up to some islands and the other direction of the motorway. My partner is driving and pulls out left to head towards the way home. As he pulls out and we are passing the bushes on our left with the car parked the other side of them, we both notice a figure crouching on the pavement facing the bushes. It looked like a male because of their stature. They were quite thin but tall and he was sort of tucking his head into his chest trying to form a ball-like shape. It's worth noting that there is a number of homeless people in the area and therefore a small drug problem. I don't know if this related to him. For some reason his behavior caused me concern. I'm not sure whether it's the nature of my job to pick up on odd behavior, but I just felt like I should watch him for a moment to make sure he didn't need help. He wasn't tying a shoelace or looking for something on the ground. This was clear. My partner even said, "What's this guy playing at?" and in the nicest way possible, he doesn't pay much attention to anything usually. It was just really odd, the shape he had formed and his slight rocking forward and backwards. Like WTF was he doing late in the evening like this? Could he be hurt? So about 20 yards after passing him we approach a small island and I ask my partner to pull over onto the left-hand side just for a moment so I could watch this guy in the side view mirror of the passenger side where I was sitting. We watched for around 2 minutes when this guy moved onto all fours and began sort of crawling in the direction of our car. This is where I began to panic and thought this guy may actually be hurt and really need our help. It was like he was struggling to pull himself along. I think I was pretty naive and silly in my next move, but anyway, I opened my door and took a step onto the pavement, turning to face the sky. My partner also had his phone ready to call 999 if the guy was hurt, but as I turned I saw him lift up and stand upright. He was freaking tall and slender, and started to pick up his pace to a jog with no signs of slowing down. This guy wasn't hurt. It's like he stood up and had transformed into a perfectly healthy late-night jogger, except he was heading straight for us. I hopped straight back in the car and screamed at my partner to drive. Luckily the island was clear and we sped away out of sight. We did not return to see if he was still there or spend any more time worrying for his safety, just our own. We got home and debated what to do, but decided not to report it as he hadn't attempted to hurt us, or didn't get the chance, and from low visibility all I remember about his description is how tall he was and that he was a male. I don't know if the sounds were related, but where we were passing and heard the noises corresponds exactly with where he was crouching and maybe peering through the bushes. This is a huge red flag for me. Why is he making noises to attract attention from passers-by in such a creepy way? And had he watched us get in our car, and though I'm going to act really hurt to get them to pull over, I don't know, it all just seemed calculated looking back. I don't know if he was on drugs, or was going to try and mug us for drug money, or whether he was just out of his mind, but either way I wouldn't like for him to have reached our car, and I'm glad my gut kicked in and we drove away and never found out what he wanted. When I was in my second year of university I lived alone. It was a downstairs flat with my bedroom facing towards the street. I had some heavy green curtains so didn't mind too much. My friends lived about a 15-minute walk away and I would go over every day till sometimes around 3/4 am or sleep over. I had a long-distance boyfriend at the time so would sometimes be up late Skype sexing. Halloween rolls around and I'm out with my friends. I decide to go back to mine and be a sexy Skype supergirl for my boyfriend. We get into it, we're having a great time, curtains closed, lights off, just to be safe. I'd had a drunk man try to get in one time. I fell asleep early and left the curtains open. It had been super creepy. I woke up to the sounds of someone trying to push open the front door. When I looked up there was a man, staring, stood so close his nose almost touched the window. I'd freaked out and spent the night in the living room. So the lights were off, curtains shut. I noticed a kind of flickering in my peripheral and looked around. While meeting at the bottom, the curtains parted very slightly near the top. Through the gap there appears to be a trail of steam rising. I cover myself and get up to investigate. I have to get up and stand on my tiptoes to see through. I'm a short arse. The source of the steam was a man's mouth. Hunched over and panting, exposed at the waist, violently stroking his member. I try to quickly rearrange the curtains, grabbing my laptop and hiding in the living room. A few days later there is a pink envelope waiting for me when I walk through the door. As I pick it up, various small change falls out. Written on the lip of the envelope in a jagged, capital letters, I mean you no harm XXX. A horrible cold feeling spread throughout my body. Dread overlapped by shock. I'd never felt anything like it. I turn the card over to read the address side, there in the same handwriting, to the girl in the front room. Opening it, I see it's a quite traditional sort of card, cream with a delicate watercolor of a bouquet on the front, thinking of you in gold curvature next to it. The inside was completely covered by a message completely in capitals, some letters backwards and words misspelled. I gave the card to the police so can't recite the whole passage verbatim, but the essence was, I'm an old man who has lived on the street for a long time. Wasn't sure if it meant my street or the streets in general, more on that later. You made me the happiest I have ever been in my life on Halloween. I am sorry I scared you. You are very beautiful. I love to watch you whether you are working on your computer or touching yourself. Please leave your curtains open just a little bit for me. For each time you do this I will post a couple of pounds through the letterbox. Signed, Ken XXXXXX. I called my friends, then got the police to come round. Basically they couldn't really do anything. They took the card as evidence, gave me a case number and said that they would get the patrol car to drive past my house for the near future. I stayed at my friend's for a week and had one of them stay over at mine after that. That wasn't quite the last of Ken. Sometimes there would be a knocking at my window, but kept my curtains 100% closed. 3 or 4 months of no incidents later, we got snow. I was leaving my house, now in the habit of checking my curtains every time I left or got back to the house. I see a set of footprints tracing the entire front window, back and forth, like someone had been pacing. After I moved, my friend had a job where she could check the local electoral register. We did find that A.K. Mordo lived on my previous street. We did no further investigations, haha, because it was a studenty area. I would walk past that house on my way home for the next 2 years. A while after I'd moved out, I saw that the windows had been completely covered in newspaper, stuck from the inside. Seemed like someone was having trouble with Ken still coming round. Let's not meet again, Ken.